Today I want to cover automobile coverages. And it's very important for you to understand this. And I know a lot of agents do a wonderful job out there who sell automobile insurance, and they explain this to their clients. But I run across too many people that don't understand what their coverages are. And the very common comment that I get from my clients when I ask them, well, what coverage do you have? They respond, I have full coverage. And then they cannot define what their coverages are. In other words, the amounts of their coverages and the significance of the coverages. So with that said, I'd like to kind of go through this, this idea and the amounts of coverages and the significance of those coverages through using my own insurance coverage and my own what's called a declaration page. So I wanted to share that with you. I do have State Farm. I'm not endorsing State Farm or any other insurance company. So I just want you to know that there are good insurance companies out there, and there's not so good insurance companies, but I do have State Farm, and so you'll see that policy. So what I would like to do is share my screen, show you my declaration page, and then let's go through some of the coverages that I have and the significance of. Let's do it. So I'm going to share my screen. And there it is. So State Farm, Bettina, number of vehicles, fine, great. That doesn't really matter. So the amount of vehicles you have are going to be reported on your this is called a declaration page, and that they're identifying the vehicles. I kind of blocked them out. It's not a very pretty example, but please forgive me for that. But the important part are these things down here, which begin with under this area right in here, all the way down. Those highlight the amounts of coverages and what is specifically covered. So let's take the first example, which is liability coverage. And I'm going to use my little trusty highlighter and highlight that. I think I am. Well, maybe I don't. I thought I did it here in a second ago. There we go. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So we have liability coverage, and then under that is bodily injury, each person, each accident, 500, 500. Those are the amounts of coverages that I have. But let's first talk about liability coverage. So most people think that they have automobile coverage and covering their car only for the times when they have an accident or collision and they cause that collision. And that is partly true, but not completely true. And frankly, I will make the case that that is not the most important reason why you have coverage, but you're going to have coverage whether you like it or not. So it's important to have that liability coverage, meaning that if you're liable, responsible, at fault for causing the collision, then you're going to have certain coverages available to you. And if you see the 500, 500, that's the amount of coverage or the upper limit of the coverage that you have. So when you have each person in each accident, so each person, what does that mean? So if someone that you hit in a collision and it's your fault and you hurt that person as a result of that collision, then that person has coverage under your policy up to $500,000, no more than $500,000. So what that means is, and what's important about that number is that if you're a person of means, upper middle class, what we consider in our society wealthy, whatever that means, it's kind of an arbitrary term, but you want to make sure that you have enough coverage available to you just in case you cause somebody to be injured, because of course you would want, I would hope, that that you would want that person amply covered. So you can use other tools called an umbrella policy if you want more coverage that you don't want to incorporate in your auto policy. But we can talk about that another time. I want to focus in on these coverages under your liability coverage. So I have a $500,000, what's called a 500-500 policy. And so you see that each person has up to 500,000 coverage, but each accident is covered, or collision that I cause is covered up to 500,000. So they're the same figure. In a lot of policies, they're not the same figure. You have a 25/50 policy, a 100/300 policy, 250/500 policy. Those kind of numbers are commonly heard and used in automobile coverages. So if I cause a wreck and 2 people are injured, they will only be able to access $500,000 per collision. So it's true 500 per person, but if I hurt multiple people, then they only have a $500,000 coverage. All right. So that's the meaning of 500 and then 500. If you had a 50/100 policy, for example, and substitute the 500,000 for each person for 50, which is not very good coverage, I will tell you. And then you have each accident is 100, then the accident or the collision is covered with a $100,000 policy for the total wreck. Meaning that if there are multiple people injured in the wreck, then they would be able to tap into the $100,000. So that's a little difference in the policies there, but this is my policy. So there's the liability coverage. That explains the coverages there. So I will get rid of those highlights, and there's that one. So let's look down a little bit below and see that we've got uninsured. No, before I get to uninsured, let's talk about property damage limit. And so let's highlight that. And there we go. So there's the area that I'm talking about in this declaration page. So in this is also covered. And so if you cause property damage, you hit a car, you injure the car, what amount of coverage do you have to repair or replace that car? So in my policy, I've got $100,000. So if I hit a fancy dancy, let's say Mercedes, or what are some really fancy cars out there? Lexus, whatever, Lamborghini. I saw an awesome Corvette the other day at a place that was just gorgeous. Looked like a Lamborghini to me. But anyway, if I injured that car and I totaled it, God forbid, but if I did, then they would have access under my policy of a total of $100,000. Most cars are not valued that much, so that should be, generally speaking, ample coverage. Not for a Lamborghini, but anyway, if I lived in California, I would up my coverage, but $100,000 is typically ample coverage. And those numbers are, I will suggest to you to make sure you pay attention to these numbers. They are auto-filled in, meaning that when you pick out a 500 policy, State Farm and every other insurance company will pick the number that is corresponding from their database and fill in that number there, which is the $100,000 in property damage. You can always purchase more coverage or less coverage, frankly, but you can purchase more coverage. So if I didn't feel that that was enough and I wanted $200,000 coverage for any physical damage to a car, vehicle, then I can increase that amount. But I think 100 is ample for me as far as I'm concerned. So let's take away those highlights. And look below here, and let's look at what I consider to be the most important coverages that you have, and that's called uninsured motorist coverage, which is right here. And I've got that coverage. So uninsured motorist coverage, or what's called UIM or UM coverage. So that encompasses, it's just not uninsured, it's underinsured motorist coverage. So it doesn't say that, but that's what it covers. That is, if you were hit by somebody, that it's their fault, they caused it, they're the wrongdoer, and they hurt you, and somebody in your car, your family member, wife, husband, child, whatever, or whomever, and they didn't have any insurance whatsoever. Let's take that scenario first. So the person who hit you didn't have any automobile insurance coverage. They let their policy lapse, or they just didn't bother to buy insurance despite the law requiring them to do so. Then you have to look to your own policy to cover you. And I will say to you that that is the most important reason why you need to have good coverage, or high coverage, as much as you can possibly afford. So you can see that I have a $500,000 each person, $500,000 each collision. It says here accident. I don't like the word accident because there's rarely an accident involving two vehicles. It's always somebody's fault. So the word accident is a misnomer as far as I'm concerned, but that's what the policy says. And so it mirrors, or it matches typically the liability coverage. So in this case, it certainly does. You can purchase more uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage if you want, but most insurance companies, including my policy and my company, autofill those amounts, meaning exactly what I just told you about the property damage. They pick the numbers, and then they typically don't go over the numbers with you for whatever reasons. It's a small criticism for me because I think it's important for you to understand the significance. Some agents do it, most do not, frankly. So with that said, you need to be a wise, a prudent, educated consumer, and looking at these figures here with the uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. So mine mirror what I have for the liability coverage, which is fine. I'm getting to the point, frankly, where I don't have enough insurance, and I'm going to increase the values. I've had these values and amounts for a number of years now. So I see too much, and I'm going to bump up my coverages. But this is what I have right now. So again, it's the same kind of concept, and I'm not going to repeat the concept that I did with the liability, but each person, if I get hurt, then I have access to $500,000. If multiple people are in my car, or two people are in my car, then they have access to $500,000 coverage if that person has no insurance. So scenario number 2 is if the person who hits you causes the wreck, and they have insurance, but it's not enough. So let's say they have a minimal coverage amount of $25,000 per person, $50,000 per wreck. And that's the minimum here in Virginia. It hasn't changed since the 1970s when Nixon was our president. So that's pretty horrific, but I'm not going to get on my soapbox right at this point. So with that said, if they have not enough insurance to cover your claim, then you have to go in and tap into your underinsured motorist coverage. And then it's the same coverage. It's $500,000 per person under this example, $500,000 each accident. So that's why it's so important to have uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage, and making sure that it's ample, because we would never ever rely on the world, on strangers to protect us and our family and have enough insurance or have insurance. We would just never do it. I've asked that question to my clients over the years many times, and I have never had a person say, well, heck, I would rely on other drivers to protect me. I don't know who they are. I don't know what their means are. I don't know if they care about me or not. But nobody says that, frankly. So, and it's silly to say that somebody is going to rely on another human who doesn't know them, it's not part of their family, and to protect them and have enough insurance. People are doing the best they can out there. A lot of people are, Some people are not, but a lot of people are, and they pay for what they can afford. And then they don't understand the importance of these coverages. So I want you to understand the importance of this coverage and make sure that you have enough coverage on your policies to protect your family in case you cause injury. You would want that person to be protected and covered. But also, if you're injured by somebody and it's their fault, you want to make sure that your family is covered and that you are covered. That's so important. If you have any questions whatsoever, I hope this was educational for you. It's great to look at real life example here. So you can go now pull out your declaration page, see what your coverages are and the amounts of your coverages. And now you know why they're significant. If you have any questions whatsoever, please call me, Bettina Altizer Law.